A team of cavers in northern Spain wasn't looking for history. They were looking for a way through the rock. But behind a narrow fracture in the limestone hills near El Sidrón, they found something that had been sealed shut for roughly 49,000 years. And what was waiting inside would force scientists to ask a question nobody wanted to answer. The bones were human, not modern human, Neanderthal. And they hadn't just died there. They'd been cut, scraped, and snapped open. The exact same way you'd butcher a deer. We like to believe cruelty is something we invented. That somewhere back in our evolutionary past, we left the animal in us behind, and everything since has been refinement. Civilization climbing steadily away from savagery. But scattered in caves and campsites tens of thousands of years old is evidence that says otherwise. This is a story about the moment hunger stops being a feeling and becomes an action, about a group of people who left behind unmistakable proof of exactly how far they went. And by the end, you'll understand not just what happened in that Spanish cave, but why the argument over why it happened says something about us that's much harder to sit with than the bones themselves. Picture the cave the way it actually was. Not a ruin, a shelter, cold air pooling near the mouth of it, the smell of wood smoke clinging to stone. Somewhere deep inside, rock groaning as it shifted. 12 or 13 people lived here. Men, women, children, what looks like an entire family, before a rockfall sealed them into the dark almost the instant they died. For decades, the story we told about Neanderthals was simple, brutish, slow-witted, barely holding on. But what turned up in that sealed chamber wasn't crude at all. It was careful, deliberate. It looked, uncomfortably, like the work of a butcher. It started with something that sounds almost boring: cut marks. Thin, precise lines on limb bones, made by stone tools, handled with the same skill a hunter uses on prey. Paleoanthropologist Antonio Rosas and his team at Spain's Museo Nacional de Ciencias Naturales spent years on these remains, and the pattern they found wasn't chaotic. It was consistent, almost clinical. The marks traced the exact same anatomical lines used to strip meat, separate joints, and crack bones open for the marrow inside. Even the skulls had been opened, the same way you'd open one to reach the brain. And when zoo archaeologist Yolanda Fernandez Jalvo laid these bones side by side with butchered deer, remains from the same period, the cut patterns were nearly identical. Whoever did this didn't just kill these people. They processed them like food. You'd think that would be the worst part of the story. It isn't, because El Sidrón wasn't alone. Over 100 years earlier, at a rock shelter in Krapina, Croatia, paleontologist Dragutin Gorjanović Kramberger dug up hundreds of Neanderthal bone fragments showing the exact same signature: deliberate breakage, cut marks, and something else. The small bones were simply missing, as if they'd been thrown away instead of buried. For a long time, the field chose the gentler explanation. Maybe this was reverence, not hunger, a ritual some cultures still practice today, called endocannibalism, where the dead are consumed as an act of honor, not need. It was a comforting theory. It let the violence mean something. Then DNA broke the theory apart. Genetic testing on the El Sidrón remains turned up something nobody expected. The adults were closely related, but the group's genetic diversity was strikingly low. The signature of a small, isolated population running out of options. Add in clear signs of nutritional stress in the bones, and the story stopped looking like a farewell ceremony. It started looking like a starving family or a rival band, stripping every last calorie from bodies that had no way to object. Ritual gave way to something far colder: desperation, and this is the part that's genuinely hard to sit with. If this was one family, one band, then whoever did this may have done it to people they loved. If instead it was two groups, one Neanderthal band consuming the dead of another, it means something we almost never associate with them: rivalry, territory, violence severe enough to end here. Neither theory is comfortable. Both fit the evidence. Researchers are still split, and that split matters, because pretending science has landed on one clean answer would be a lie. It hasn't. Here's what we do know for certain. The cut marks are documented, peer-reviewed, undeniable. The comparison to animal butchery isn't a theory, it's forensic fact. What's still unresolved is why. Starvation, ritual, war, or some tangle of all three, nobody has fully pulled apart yet. That line, between what the bones prove and what they only suggest, is the difference between real science and a headline built to shock you. Keep that line in mind, because the story's about to get much bigger than one cave, El Sidrón isn't a strange, isolated horror from some distant, more primitive species. It's the first data point in a pattern that keeps resurfacing over and over in human history. In 1820, sailors adrift in the Pacific after the sinking of the whaling ship, Essex drew lots to decide who would die so the others could eat. In the winter of 1846, settlers trapped by snow in the Sierra Nevada made the same call, some only after every other possibility was gone. In 1972, survivors of a plane crash in the Andes faced the identical choice, agonizing over it for days before they crossed a line they never thought they'd approach. Different centuries, different continents, no connection to each other whatsoever. And yet, given the exact same absence of food, human beings have landed on the exact same last resort, again and again. It's tempting to file the Neanderthals away as other, a lesser cousin, not us. The Essex, the Donner Party, the Andes. They say otherwise. None of this means violence is sitting just beneath the surface of every person, waiting for permission. It's something quieter than that, and honestly, more unsettling. The rules we treat as absolute, the ones that feel unbreakable, were built for the world as it normally is. They were never stress-tested against the world at its worst. Somewhere between a full stomach and true starvation, there's a line most of us will spend our entire lives never getting close to. The people in that Spanish cave crossed it. So did sailors, and stranded settlers, and plane crash survivors, thousands of years apart with nothing in common except the same brutal math. Maybe that's the real message buried in those bones at El Sidrón. Not that our ancestors were savages, but that the gap between civilization and its complete absence was never as wide as we've told ourselves it is. It was only ever a matter of how much was left to eat.